So recently I asked you guys which film I should compare to Infinity War, and you chose one of my most favourite Marvel Cinematic Universe films. I'm not gonna lie, this is gonna be tough. Let the battle commence. Civil War opens with a handful of our heroes fighting off some of the remaining Hydra agents, with Captain America leading the team. Just as they were about to capture the final one, the Hydra agent sets off a bomb in the middle of a crowded area with the intent to kill a large number of people. Scarlet Witch uses her power to prevent this, but before she can raise him high enough, he explodes right next to a populated building. Due to this event, the Secretary of the State, yeah, this asshole, says that the Avengers have been operating recklessly and it has resulted in the death of innocents. So to prevent this from happening again, he proposes that they sign these accords which basically say that the government owns their ass. For example, if they see a threat, they are not allowed to engage it unless the government says so, or they will get imprisoned. If the government tells them to fight and they decide not to, they also get imprisoned. So in other words, Ross wasn't able to get the army of Hulks that he initially intended, so he decides to get an army of superheroes instead. After being offered these accords, the Avengers are divided. Some naively decide that they should sign the accords, and the others think more rationally about it and realize just how self-fulfilling and cynical it sounds. And this results in what I think is the best line from the Marvel Cinematic Universe with regards to social commentary.
This is the United Nations we're talking about. It's not the World Security Council, it's not SHIELD, it's not Hydra.
No, but it's run by people with agendas, and agendas change.
You can apply this in real life, but in relation to this story, Captain America just perfectly described Ross here. While this is all going on, the Winter Soldier has surfaced and the government want to recapture, imprison, and account him for his recent destructive actions, whereas Captain America, knowing he was a victim of mind control, wants to help him. As the plot continues to unfold, Captain America finds that a mysterious figure called Zemo has an agenda to command an army of Winter Soldiers that were raised and programmed in the same facility as Bucky. The government don't want to listen to him, nor does Tony or the rest of the Avengers, and so this is where the heroes get divided and the Civil War part of the movie takes place. Despite the consequences of this battle, Captain America and Bucky, joined by Iron Man, continue the mission to try to stop Zemo from unleashing an army of super soldiers. However, when they finally find him, they discover what his plan really was. And the story for Infinity War is that following the events of Thor Ragnarok, Thanos and his children murder Thor's people in an attempt to obtain the Infinity Stone from the Tesseract, which Loki snuck out of Asgard before it got destroyed. After succeeding, Thanos proceeds to obtain the rest of the Infinity Stone so he can wipe out half of the universe's population. It is from here our heroes try their hardest to stop Thanos from acquiring the rest of the stones, but in the end, they ultimately fail. And that's pretty much all there is to the story in Infinity War. Now, even though the movie isn't heavy on story, it more than makes up for with the very effective character development with Thanos, as well as intuitively involving our heroes into this war and getting them to interact and converse with each other. It's also important to note that despite this movie being a continuation from Civil War and taking place 2 years later, it also provides continuation of character arcs for heroes such as Gamora, Drax, and Nebula, as they all had connections to Thanos in their own respective movies. And I gotta hand it to Infinity War. I really like how it minimized the continuation of Black Widow and Bruce Banner's bittersweet relationship from Age of Ultron. It came so out of nowhere in that movie that it deserved to get pushed off to the side. Now, something you will immediately notice about Infinity War once it starts is that tonally it is very different from anything the Marvel Cinematic Universe has put out before. The movie opens feeling much darker and there is no upbeat music to go with the Marvel logo like the films prior. It's just somber, eerie, and quiet, and this was the first sign that indicated to me that this was going to be a lot different from the kid-friendly movies Marvel usually put out. And Infinity War greatly benefits from this change in tone, as it makes this fictional story feel a little more grounded in a very cruel reality. Now, out of the two movies, which one has the superior story? Well, you'd think that the story in Civil War would be far superior, as it is grounding our heroes in a much more real and relevant political reality as opposed to placing them in their usual habitat. Well, this is where I'm going to talk about the plot regarding the Accords, and I'm even going to jump the gun a little bit and talk about the villain's plan. Now, as I mentioned, one group of the Avengers decide to sign the Accords and the other group decides against it. Now, the group that signed it definitely had good intentions and they were right about their concerns, but their methods of addressing those concerns were 100% wrong. How? Well, because they decided to follow orders from this guy. The guy who tells them that their actions are reckless and they operate with too much power and no supervision. Despite the fact that he was the one who really operated with too much power and no supervision, and well, this happened. all that death and destruction to capture the Hulk for his own power-hungry motivations. So yeah, with a history like that, clearly he should be criticizing the Avengers and ordering them around, shouldn't he? Now some of you might be saying, well, he's going to collaborate and work with the Avengers. He isn't just going to treat them like shit and boss them around. Well, about an hour later, Tony finds out about Zemo's tactics to infiltrate Bucky's evaluation, the murder he carried out to the real psychiatrist who was supposed to do the evaluation, and a full disguise that he wore to frame Bucky. And despite having a ton of proof, what does Ross say?
You seriously think I'm gonna listen to you after that fiasco in Leipzig? You're lucky you're not in one of these cells.
First off, that is irrelevant, as he just gave you proof that this guy is dangerous and up to no good. And two, that was an abandoned airport as opposed to wherever Abomination was released in a fully populated city killing God knows how many. So if Ross thinks Tony should be in one of those cells for trashing an abandoned airport, then by his estimation, where the hell should he be? So yeah, great job guys, signing those accords and your lives to this hypocrite. Clearly he should be the one telling you what to do. How did this guy become Secretary of the State again?
Is he qualified?
He's a violent, bigoted, mindless old fool.
Sounds a bit overqualified. Well, get him here at once.
Also, throughout most of the movie, Team Iron Man aren't listening to Captain America regarding Bucky's innocence because they think his judgment is askew, despite the fact that Tony's judgment is really the one askew, as his whole reaction to the Accords was a direct result of his guilt from this woman he met earlier who said that her son was killed during their battle with Ultron. So accusing Captain America of having a faulty conscience even though he has one just goes to show how much of a hypocrite Tony really is. And the fact that his own team doesn't put that together also shows how dumb they are. He unloaded his guilt all over the table when they were discussing the Accords, so for them not to criticize him for his flawed logic and knock some sense into him is also a problem, and shows what crap teammates they are. Additionally, when Captain America tells them the situation that the psychiatrist who interrogated Bucky is the bad guy and that he's going to weaponize the other super soldiers, look what happens.
There are 5 more super soldiers just like him. I can't let the doctor find him first, Tony. I can't.
Steve, you know what's about to happen. Do you really want to punch your way out of this one?
See, even Black Widow is not listening to him. I honestly don't know why many people who watched this movie chose Team Iron Man's side, because they're just a bunch of morons. Captain America is very calmly explaining the situation, but they don't listen to him because...
Your judgment is askew.
Despite the fact that Tony's judgment is really the one askew. Okay, I'm not gonna explain this again. Bottom line, the whole Civil War part of the story is just too flawed and stupid to me. The movie is trying so hard to force our heroes to fight even though they are not this mindlessly confrontational. The first step to fixing these problems is if someone else with a more clean background proposed the Accords, but they didn't. It was Ross, and his involvement in this movie is a detriment to the story. And that isn't the only thing that is a detriment to the story. This is where we are going to jump the gun a little. It's time to talk about Zemo's plan. Now, the biggest flaw with his plan is that it is very specific, and if the slightest thing doesn't go the way he anticipated, then his whole plan would have been ruined and he would have been caught. Also, it's important to note that Zemo arranged and instigated this plan way before the Accords came into the picture. So my question is, when he planned this, how the hell did he know that all the Avengers wouldn't have come to fight him at once? Because if they did, it would have been game over, and it wouldn't have mattered if he showed Tony the footage of Bucky killing his mother and father, because all the Avengers would have been able to restrain him. So therefore, there would be no fight, and much like the final movie, the only fractured relationship that would come of this is between Iron Man and Captain America. Is that the so-called plan he had the whole time? To cause a feud between Captain America and Iron Man? The only reason the rest of the team is in a bad shape is because of this hypocritical asshole. If it wasn't for him, the Avengers wouldn't be divided. And even if you disregard what I just said, if Tony didn't tag along with Captain America and Bucky near the end of the film, then they would have captured Zemo and it'd be all over. Iron Man and Captain America wouldn't even be at odds with each other. Zemo could have gone ahead and shown that footage if he wanted to, but it wouldn't have done him any good. So how on earth did he manage to pull this off if there was no guarantee that Iron Man would even show up? I can keep going, but my point is that the story is unbelievably flawed, and if you think or question even the smallest bit of Zemo's plan, it just falls apart. And that is a big problem with the overall plot, and it makes the villain who could have been a cool, lower profile and effective bad guy into one big plot convenience. And as a result, the story loses some solid points in my book. So having said all of that, which of the two movies has the superior story? Well, I would still say Civil War. Despite its serious flaws, the plot is always there throughout the entire narrative, and even though it could have been executed better, the weight of it is still prevalent throughout the entire movie, even to the point that it feels like a character that is endangering our heroes, and it adds a unique feeling of hopelessness and dread. Now, Infinity War has those two feelings in droves, but that's more down to the villains rather than the story. So because of this, Civil War still has the superior story. Both Civil War and Infinity War are directed by the Russo brothers, and as you would expect, the action in both movies is very fast-paced, expertly choreographed, and creative as all heck. Something you'll also notice about the Russos' directing style is that they very cleverly managed to find a way to showcase each hero's combat style and agility, and they never fail to impress me in this regard. Something else which is interesting is that both movies have very distinct action styles. Civil War is a mix between hand-to-hand combat and traditional comic book action, whereas Infinity War is just comic book action. Primarily because it almost entirely consists of our heroes going up against CGI creatures, as well as Thanos, who is also a big CGI effect. Speaking of which, I honestly thought that the action scenes with Thanos would be very tedious and uninteresting. The reason is because I am not a fan of invincible villains, as they are just sponges that absorb all the damage our heroes dish out, and the fight can easily get very boring. But even though Thanos can take so much damage, the impact of the hits evoke a different reaction from him. Add to that the fact that the heroes are forced to unleash so much unique abilities makes the fight scenes against Thanos constantly feel fresh and new, and I could watch them all day. And the way Doctor Strange utilizes his teleportation rings to have the heroes get the jump on Thanos were great. And the tactics they used to take the gauntlet off his fist was so creative. And that's another thing I love about the craft that goes into the action scenes of both of these movies. It's not just creative, but it's also very strategic. I honestly don't know how the Russo brothers are able to put multiple heroes together and incorporate them into a coherent action set piece like this. It just baffles me. And it baffled me even more in Infinity War. This goes beyond having your actors interacting with other actors. They all have to fight characters that aren't really there, and amazingly, Thanos seems just as tangible and real as the human characters, as opposed to this ugly turd. Now, Civil War's first great action scene started with a hand-to-hand fight, which turned into an on-foot chase scene, and then into a highway chase, and it was great. And so was the staple fight scene where all our heroes battle each other, and despite the circumstances leading up to the fight being nonsensical, that did not prevent it from being bloody amazing. It was fast-paced, had tons of memorable moments, and it had a constant energy which never let up. Not to mention that the surprise standout was Scarlet Witch, who, much like in Infinity War, stepped in and literally saved her teammates' necks on multiple occasions. The only problem with this whole entire action scene, though, is that it had no tension and the tone was completely wrong. For some reason, this scene is treated as nothing but fun, when really, it should have been tragic. Seeing our heroes reach a point in their relationship where the only option left is to fight each other shouldn't be a pretty sight. It can be fun at times with scenes such as this. But to stick with the fun element all the way through was wrong. And to top it off, this one joke very early on completely killed any remaining sense of urgency in this fight.
We're still friends, right?
Depends on how hard you hit me.
These are the kind of jokes Marvel do that I downright despise. This one joke crippled this entire scene and made me realize this fight isn't serious or dangerous, it's just a bunch of kids playing on the playground. The only time someone could have gotten seriously hurt is when Rhodey for some reason decided to assholishly disintegrate a member of the team, but thankfully he got hit instead. And it's a real shame he didn't die for that. Backstabbing, good-for-nothing son of a... Now I just want to reiterate that I still love this whole action scene, and it is definitely one of the best and most memorable scenes in the entire MCU, but if it injected a darker tone, then it could have been so much more. And it's because of this kid-friendly tone that I don't consider this the best action scene of the movie. The best one to me is the final fight between Iron Man, Captain America, and Bucky. Unlike the previous fight, the motivations made sense as it was initiated over personal reasons, there was plenty of development enabling you to understand both sides, the tone was a combination of serious and fun, unlike the previous fight, all the while the music throughout the entire battle was great, and then it goes to the next level as the soundtrack really kicks into gear and makes the scene even more disheartening, and this further cemented how tragic and brutal this fight is. Even when it was over, I felt none of these emotional beats in the airport fight scene. It was just fun and nothing more. So out of the two movies, which one has the superior action? Well, I love the action in both movies, and I really am struggling to choose one over the other here. But the film that edges it and has the slightly better action is Infinity War. Like I said, I had so much fun with the action in Civil War, but when the scenes were over, I felt satisfied and was perfectly content with their conclusions. But in Infinity War, when the fights were over, I wanted more. I said it before and I will say it again. I could literally watch the heroes fight Thanos all day. Additionally, every single battle has so much tension that you're always on the edge of your seat. Civil War, on the other hand, only had one real tension-driven action scene towards the end of the movie. So yeah, the movie with the superior action is Infinity War. So in my spoiler-free review, I described Thanos as being very imposing and scary. And after watching the movie for a second time, this time knowing what he was going to do, that hasn't changed. Thanos is still intimidating and frightening, and you really hope that he doesn't lose his temper. What's so great about him is that I don't look at him as a typical CGI character. He actually comes across like a real living thing. He encompasses so much detail in his movements, facial expressions, and mannerisms that anytime he was on screen, you couldn't take your eyes off him. Not to mention that his children, the Black Order, were so fierce and creepy, and their powers were very threatening. Without a doubt, they are better than every other villain Marvel have tried to incorporate in their cinematic universe movies, with perhaps the exception of Killmonger in Black Panther. But the fact that Marvel have struggled to make just one good CGI supervillain and the Russo brothers come in and give us Thanos and his children just goes to show how great they are at portraying their bad guys. Now earlier I mentioned that the story for Infinity War was pretty weak, but that isn't really a big issue, as the main difference with Infinity War is that it's a movie that strives off of character arcs, the main one being Thanos, who gets tons of development, and Gamora. We get to see how Thanos encountered and took her from her planet when she was a child, and this is one of the relationships that actually feeds into Thanos' arc. And strangely enough, something you'll notice about Thanos is that he's also a very honorable villain. He doesn't take joy in killing people. In fact, there are many times where he could easily kill someone, but he leaves them alive. As well as demonstrating his moral sensibilities, it also showcases that he sees them as so insignificant and inferior that keeping them alive is not a concern to him. And this could have so easily made him fall into the trap of monologuing for the sake of monologuing. But thankfully, he doesn't do that. He always has something of substance to say, and he very naturally changes his tune depending on the situation. Like when he's talking to Doctor Strange as soon as he arrives on Titan. He doesn't immediately start fighting, he actually partakes in a very civilized and calm conversation, and you can clearly tell that he is still in a disheartened mood after killing Gamora. It's actually the heroes that initiate the fight. You could tell that he would prefer not to, but he has no issue with fighting if it means achieving his goal. And the music that plays whenever Thanos shows up, especially when he appears in Wakanda towards the end of the movie, is very effective and bears several similarities to a horror movie. And then, as the heroes try their hardest but ultimately fail to beat him, the music transitions into something very sad and tragic. It really was an amazing use of the soundtrack, and the movie wouldn't be the same without it. And now it's time to talk about Zemo. Now I'm not going to repeat what I have already said, so I will just say this. Zemo was a good idea for a villain, but his whole agenda really needed a full rewrite. I think it would have been better if he was someone of a higher authority who lost his family to the battles fought off by the Avengers. Think about it. He could have been the one to make the power-hungry General Ross as Secretary of the State. Knowing of his failed attempt at capturing and weaponizing the Hulk, he could propose him the idea of the Accords to control the Avengers instead. This way, we won't question how an old fart like Ross got a promotion despite his prior destructive actions, and Zemo, being of a higher authority, could have already had access to information about the Winter Soldier's past missions. And whilst he uses Ross as a public face to hide behind, he could organize and orchestrate the plan. It would cut down on the plot holes, and it would provide some much needed context as to how everything ended up the way it did. And it would also be interesting commentary that governments and politicians have corrupt higher-ups that operate behind the scenes and we aren't privy to it. It would also be additional development for Captain America, who in The Winter Soldier learned the hard way how the government operates. This would also further his insight as to how horrible, immoral, and treacherous our world has become. It is primarily a Captain America movie, of course, so this would act as a great development for him. Whether you agree with my view or not, my point is that there are much better ways the movie could have executed Zemo's plan, tying it in with both the story and characters. As is, it's a great idea for a story, but it just has way too many plot holes. So this hardly comes as a shock, but the movie with the far superior villain is Infinity War. You know, it might sound like I hate Civil War, but I really don't. At the very least, I do admire that Civil War at least made an attempt at telling an interesting and thought-provoking story, and if anything, it makes me appreciate it even more than I would have otherwise. And despite the characters being unnaturally forced into these situations, you still like them. Sure, I look at Tony as being the absent-minded villain of the movie, but I still really enjoy his character. And you could make the argument that his hypocritical personality makes him a more realistic and flawed individual, but at the same time, you would expect him to know better, as the last time he acted out of emotion, he created Ultron. And you know, the fact that Ross was so viciously after one of their own. But despite all that, I am still really surprised by Civil War. And I was very surprised to find out that the story for Infinity War continued right from where Thor Ragnarok left off. I honestly didn't expect that, and the fact that it did this means it adds some additional value and substance to Ragnarok as well. I have always said that a sign of a good sequel is if it makes the previous movies better, and Infinity War gave Ragnarok relevance to which I first thought it had very little. And unlike the previous Marvel movies, I like how the Russo brothers get these characters to utilize their own unique personalities whilst keeping themselves balanced and not overbearingly one note as they are in their own movies, such as Doctor Strange and especially the Guardians of the Galaxy. Heck, even Doctor Strange's cloak was done much better. I did not even once compare it to the magic carpet in Aladdin this time. Vision, on the other hand, who is the strongest of the Avengers, was watered down in Civil War, but he was downright useless in Infinity War. He would always get his butt kicked and everyone had to protect him. I know the children of Thanos have more lethal weapons at their disposal, but I expected him to show more resilience than this. And I couldn't point this out in my spoiler-free review, so I'll do it now. Star-Lord really did screw things up for everyone. I know he's been portrayed as an impulsive character in the past, but the difference in Infinity War is that they almost took Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet off. All he had to do was sit back and wait a few seconds. Also, Stark threw a mountain on Thanos and that just got him mad, so what does Star-Lord think his sissy punches are going to do? Also, another thing I take issue with in Infinity War is the fact that it killed off certain characters that Marvel have already announced are going to get sequels. And that really is a shame, because if they didn't announce those sequels and kept them quiet, then we could have at the very least experienced some uncertainty as to whether Marvel really decided to kill these heroes off or not. But nope, I already know that Spider-Man is going to come back. I already know that Black Panther is going to stick around too, as Kevin Feige has publicly expressed his desire for Ryan Coogler to return to direct the sequel. So that, along with Marvel repeatedly cheating death in their previous movies, is the two detriments to the final scene in Infinity War. Now, it was very effective, but it could have been more. But, watching it through the eyes of our remaining heroes who don't know that their fallen comrades are going to come back was still very effective. And that ultimately doesn't take too much away from the movie as a whole. It's time for the scores. Civil War gets an 8 out of 10, and Infinity War gets a 10. Coming to this decision was not easy, as I adore these movies and they are both in my list of top 3 Marvel Cinematic Universe films. But there's no denying that Civil War has so many problems with the story, but the stuff it gets right, such as expanding on these characters that we already know and love, is what really makes this movie so fun to watch. And again, I can't get over how creative the action is in both films. I always thought the action in the previous Avengers movies was kind of stale, too simplified, and only once in a while they would perform a super cool attack. But the Russo trilogy never had a dull or slow moment. Seriously, the action is absolutely breathtaking, and I don't know how they are constantly able to accomplish this in their 3rd movie now. And I cannot wait until Avengers 4 comes out. Ant-Man and the Wasp is coming in a couple months, but I honestly don't care for it at this point. It looks fun, but as far as my Marvel Cinematic Universe experience goes, I want to keep the amazing ending of Infinity War in my mind for a few more months. Anything else feels like a distraction at this point. And do you know what's funny? I was planning to use Infinity War to take a hit at Justice League. But incidentally, it's not Justice League that I've been comparing Infinity War to lately. It's Star Wars The Last Jedi. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, but hear me out. Recently, J.J. Abrams said that us males that take issue with Rey being so great at everything with no training is because we feel threatened by strong female characters. And then the president of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, comes out with artificial statements like this.
He writes amazingly fierce and independent women.
Well, they are completely full of crap, because Infinity War has proved them wrong. Infinity War and tons of previous comic book movies have had female characters, and we never questioned their abilities because they had been given structural stories to prove their worth. Rey has not. I mean, in less than a week, she gives Master Yoda a run for his money. Not to mention that the recent Marvel movies, including Infinity War, have had an extremely diverse cast of women who are white, black, Asian, and heck, even blue and green. And Infinity War puts all of them together in one movie, and us so-called threatened guys have not complained even once about them. Because Kevin Feige and the folks at Marvel know how to portray female characters, and Kathleen Kennedy and her team of hacks don't. They hide behind their mindless and illogical excuses and insults, whereas Infinity War did its thing, and it did it phenomenally well. And it simultaneously had a ton of other characters to focus on too. So yeah, I have already forgotten about Justice League. Heck, here's my new rating for it. But the new Star Wars movies have just gotten even worse in my estimation, and I honestly don't give a shit about them anymore. Congratulations, Marvel. I never thought I'd say this, but you are now better than Star Wars. I look forward to seeing what movies you come out with next, including Captain Marvel. And the fact that you respect your fans and don't shit on them like these incompetent sore losers makes me look at you with a newfound respect. So that's it for another Versus video. If you liked it, then please give it a thumbs up and also share it as well, as I have put a lot of work into this one. And don't forget to click that subscribe button and the bell right next to it if you haven't already for more Versus videos and other movie and TV show related content. Until the next time guys, I will catch all of you next time. Take care.